Hey everybody, so today I'd like to read Chapter 3 from Act 2 of the Hollow Vale. This is one of my favourite chapters, as it begins to talk about more places where I grew up. So Bridgewater, where I was born, appears in this, obviously with a different name. I call it Paratonum, which is a faux, kind of made-up Latin version of the name that locals could have called it in the 400s. Chapter 3, The Masked Oracle. The path to the abandoned hamlet of Hamp, slightly south of Paratonum, Bridgewater, had not been there before. Of that Arno was certain. It had woven itself into the riverbank, winding west through shale and scrub, veiled in roots and shadows that moved like the tales of forgotten storms. The whisper flow murmured below, its twisting course softened by distance, yet the sound carried with it a rhythm, one that lured their feet without their consent. Mira stumbled first, her hands brushing against the brittle edges of limestone as she caught herself. "This feels like a mistake," she said, her voice trailing off as if the air itself had stolen it. Her shadow danced on the stone beside her, wrong somehow, tilting when her body did not. Caelwyn stopped just before her, catching her breath. "We can't. It's not." She pressed her hand to her temple, the spiral rune on her palm faintly visible now under the gathering dusk. She couldn't say what she'd meant to. The words were gone before they could reach her tongue. Instead, she simply nodded, gesturing forward with her head. The others followed, the silence between them as heavy as the stone path beneath their boots. Then the entrance revealed itself slowly, a gaping maw of roots that seemed to breathe. Thin tendrils hung like threads, swaying not with the wind but with something deeper, older. Above the archway, in Thalionese runes, so deep the stone wept with moss, was inscribed, "Inara sulle vethil tharanador." The silence remembers the price before it is spoken. Inside, the air thickened to a weight that was not merely breath. It pressed against their skin, filling the lungs with the scent of soil and smoke. And at the center of the shrine sat the oracle. Or what passed for her. Moss and bark framed a figure, motionless yet alive, her presence vibrating outward like the resonance of a plucked string. Caelwyn stepped forward before she could stop herself. The others watched, as if through a gauze of half-memory, their surroundings twisting inwards. The stone circled the oracle's seat bore names no one living could read, etched so deeply that tiny rivulets of moisture leaked from the engravings, pooling like tears in the hollow beneath. Caelwyn's hands trembled, her lips parted, and the words escaped her before her mind understood him. "I give my laughter." She had not meant to say it, but the shrine responded. The air rippled with a warmth that was not comforting but consuming. Suddenly, she was no longer there. The shrine, the oracle, her companions, they dissolved. In their place stood a field of wild heather, its blooms alive with lavender hue. A small girl, barefoot and free, laughed as she chased a firefly through the flowers. The sound of that laughter, that innocent joy, was torn away, erased from the scene. The girl stopped, staring at her, confused. Then the vision shifted. Her mother stood before her, hair woven with silver threads, singing over a forge. The light pouring from her hands was molten and brilliant, illuminating a bowl of star metal in her grasp. But the sound of her voice was not a song. It was grief made music. It was unbearable. When Caelwyn opened her mouth to scream, only a faint chime escaped. The vision broke. She stood in the shrine once more, her breath shallow, her eyes wet with tears. The laughter she had carried all her life was gone. Somewhere, deep in her chest, she felt its absence like a wound. Arno lingered on the edge of the circle, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. He resisted with every fibre of his being. The shrine, the oracle, the very stones beneath his feet. They pressed against him like an unanswered question. "I gave my oath once," he muttered through gritted teeth. "To Rome. It was enough." But the silence of the shrine was not asking, it was commanding. He knelt, his movements heavy, his pride cracking under an unseen weight. "I give the oath I swore to Rome." The words left him as though pulled from his very bones. He tore a small parchment from his belt, the last remnant of his written commission. The Emperor's sigil was faded, the ink cracked, but it still bore the weight of his identity. He placed it at the oracle's feet. He murmured, "Senatus populus quesque Romanus perditus?" The shrine dissolved around him. He stood in a marble hall, its walls flanked by statues of soldiers. Their faces were smooth, featureless, but their forms were recognizable. Shields, spears, the unmistakable discipline of Rome. At the end of the hall, a fountain stood, its basin filled not with water, but with ash. The air burned his throat as he approached it. A voice came then, not aloud, but through his very marrow, as if the shrine itself spoke into his being. "The hollow is not death, it is forgetting made flesh. You are what the world is already erasing." He looked back at its hands, the calluses, the scars, the hard-earned weight of his soldier's life. They were gone. His sword felt lighter, almost weightless. The hole vanished and he was back at the shrine. He stood slowly, his fingers brushing where the parchment had been. It was ash now, scattered at the oracle's feet. There is more to that chapter, and of course more to the whole book itself. That's Act 2. I like that scene because they start to really explore their memories, individual ones, very personal to each of them. And that's something that we go through. So we go through different stages of life. Now, I might seem younger, but I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I'm not scared to say that I've been through very difficult situations. This speaks to that. This speaks to remembering those situations. Sometimes when you don't want to. And at this point in the book, chapter 3 of Act 2, they're forced to confront themselves, their very fears, things that they never wanted to lose. And they're reminded of that. They're reminded of that and how it changes from the past to the present. And as we reach solstice, well, I'm not sure of the date today, but in a few days' time, it will be summer solstice, finally. Summer's definitely here. We have to remember those things and let the light back into our lives and remember things, spread goodness. And that's kind of what I talk about in these books, in Hollow Vale. It's about remembering. And I think for me growing up in Somerset, I wish I'd had something that made me think of Somerset. I wish I had something that made me remember the old names and the history. I'm so grateful to Glastonbury, to Shepton Mallet, all those amazing places for the history that you keep alive. It stays with me, even here in Canada. Anyway, happy solstice, and enjoy your week.